Welcome to the PhenomWell podcast. My name is Sam Post. Our guest today is Kevin Schenkel. Kevin is the founder of Noah Brands, and he's currently with Aces Hemp here in North Carolina. I think it's, I don't know what, we're in Salisbury, North Carolina, but there's no telling where Aces Hemp and Noah Brands is. I think it's kind of spread around a little bit, but Kevin, you can tell us about that. One thing I've noticed, Kevin, is that your journey is a little bit like the journey of hemp in recent years. This kind of parallels the industry. Can you tell us how you got into this and what you're up to, and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, Sam, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this opportunity all week. I've always had a passion for the cannabis plant in general. In 2009, I graduated from UNC Charlotte with a mechanical engineering degree. Kind of dabbled around in the solar engineering or the solar industry. From there, went on to gain my master's in engineering management. Did the whole corporate thing for about 6 years, designing large-scale utility solar farms. Make a long story short there, I kind of outgrew the culture for the company and was offered a severance package, gratefully, that was allowed me to pretty much take a salaries engineer for 2 years to walk away from that situation. And from there, I picked back up my passion for the cannabis plant and went straight west. Landed in a small town, which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with, Boulder.
Hold on. We'll come back to headed straight west. I'm curious about, so you've got a master's degree in engineering?
Yeah, so a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and then a master's in engineering management.
Where's your master's from?
UNC Charlotte as well.
That's amazing. You know, I've talked to lawyers. I've had people call me to sell product, and they're, I used to be an attorney before I did this. So that's fascinating. Kevin, looking at you. I mean, with, your hair and the way you dress and everything, it's like, I thought you were just some guy on the farm. I had no idea. So anyway, you had all this unbelievable training and career, great career, and then you headed west. So
yeah,
I interrupted you.
So kind of touched on what you said. Dreadlocks down to my waist, half my body covered in tattoos. I didn't really fit that corporate image. So, like I said, I took a severance package from that company and utilized that money and that capital at that time to go out west to kind of pursue my passion with the cannabis plant. To be quite honest, got involved in a little bit of the black market scene out in Boulder. Boulder wasn't for me. Not a big fan of the cold weather. So from there, I went out to Santa Ana and was a part of a white market operation growing traditional marijuana outdoors. Loved it. Once again, expressing my passion for the plant, but was a long way away from home and had always been chasing a certain female at the time too. So when the whole hemp industry kind of was being discussed and talked about, and ultimately they were starting to issue license, for hemp cultivation, I immediately packed my bags and headed back east. And that was in 17. So in 2017, gained a hemp cultivation license. And this was just a one-man show at this time. One of my mother's friends that was a school teacher with had a small plot of land and gave me pretty much allowed me to use that small plot of land to embark on my first hemp crop. From there, it was just an explosion of opportunity. When I do something, it's 100% go. I pretty much, 24/7, 365, and started pretty much involving myself in anything hemp farming, hemp industry, from genetics to products. And ultimately that year had a successful crop on about a half acre. Thoroughly enjoyed the farming experience. I don't have any traditional farming background, so I learned real quick to really grow in the cannabis industry that was my Achilles heel. So I started establishing a farming network, and about that time, it created my first small LLC, which is Creator Seed Farming, and basically established a small network of farms. because I knew that I could grow the plant from start to finish very successfully, but was lacking that infrastructure, the land, the large equipment. So I pretty much went and sold my soul to a small group of farmers that I could ensure them that to give the best consulting, the best product possible, but ultimately needed their resources at the time to produce a nice crop. So now we're in 18 at this point, and developed a very small farming network of about 7 farmers. But once again, staying night and day in the cannabis industry, meeting everyone that I possibly could, not only the networking side, but as far as the product development side. And by chance, at that point, I was introduced to at the time, a startup company for an extraction facility, and that was Aces Hemp. Their extraction facility is now located in Eden, North Carolina, and their office headquarters in Greensboro, North Carolina. So from there, they made me pretty much a offer I couldn't deny, and pretty much had to pass along what at the time was Creator Seed Farming, and created Noah Inc. That allowed me to pretty much establish that farming network while paying attention and jumping on board, 40 hours a week with an extraction facility. So when I come on board to the extraction facility, I inherited pretty much a database of 86 farmers that were farming hemp in 2018 for me to manage. Ultimately, ensure that they were successful with their cultivation and harvest, and ultimately creating the biomass schedule for the extraction facility. That allowed me to really get out and pretty much live in my suburban at the time, traveling around through North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and West Virginia, introducing myself and pretty much making myself available for this 86 farmer network. Along those travels, really fully smothering myself in the hemp industry. At that time, that's pretty much when the biomass market kind of tanked, with the glut from 2018. But ultimately, I was able to maintain an outstanding relationship with this network of farmers to help make sure they're successful, and to be, stay involved with the full hemp process from seed to shelf. I now work in an office, an ACES office at Noah Brands. Noah Brands is located in Salisbury, North Carolina, which encompasses 4 entities underneath it, pretty much utilizing all products and byproducts of the hemp space. Pretty much, if you can drink it, we make it. If you can eat it, we manufacture it. If you smoke it, we grow it. And soon to be, when the FDA finally gets involved, a food service group.
I still don't know. It sounds like I'm trying to think, what does Kevin do? And it's like you do everything.
Kevin does a lot and sleeps a little, but ultimately I enjoy it. So I guess, a day in the life of Kevin, I wake up and I'm very fortunate to live at one of our largest facilities, the flower factory in Salisbury, North Carolina. My wife and I, we have a small home in the compound. So Noah Brands sits on a 37-acre compound, which actually used to be a old cold mold facility. It's about 6 or 7 buildings ranging anywhere from 3,000 square feet to 15,000 square feet. My drive to work consists of getting on the gator and going down the driveway.
You said cold, what'd you say, cold mold?
So it was an old cold mold facility. So to the best of my knowledge, they produced molds for the lumber industry that ultimately had to be cured in a certain environment. Which worked kind of well for us in the hemp space, well insulated building to be able to maintain the drying and curing processes.
And that's where I was the other day.
Absolutely. We're also under construction at that site, really trying to set up a small just dispensary display, because my ultimate goal is to be able to bring store owners in, local or nationwide, to kind of show them the vast products that we can offer to their store at a wholesale basis.
I got it. Well, we're customers. Although I had no idea, how much y'all did actually, because one day your dad dropped by our store and we bought some flour, and I had no idea the scope of what you're up to. Hey, let me ask you this. You said something about biomass tanked in 2018.
Yes, it was.
Th-
It was
Could you explain
unfortunate.
what biomass is, and then
So biomass is pretty much the floral material from the cannabis plant. That can range anywhere from leaves, the flower, keef, pretty much what traditional marijuana users call flower. So biomass is ultimately the floral content of the hemp plant that contains cannabinoid content, whether that's CBD, CBG. Those are two of the big prominent ones on the East Coast. And from there, that biomass is dried and cured and then extracted to produce your CBD crude or CBD distillate.
okay, so see, I've been wrong headed all this time. I thought you had the flower, and then the stems and all that stuff is the biomass, and it's cheaper, and they use it for other stuff. But you're saying the biomass is the flower.
Yeah, so in early on in the East Coast hemp industry, you had genetic companies pretty much producing a strictly biomass genetics. So Sam, you're still on the same path there. Ultimately, the flower that you see is the genetics more driven towards smokable flower. So that nice, hard, dense bud, that's high concentration of cannabinoid content. A traditional biomass genetics will not have that dense flower. It's more of a loose floral content.
Oh, okay, I got it. And that's useful for not for putting in a pipe or smoking, but more for extraction.
Absolutely. So, extraction, once you have your dried and cured biomass, and there's multiple ways to skin the extraction cats. I'm most familiar with the cryogenic ethanol. So ultimately, you wash this biomass with a hydrocarbon. The hydrocarbons then attaches itself to the cannabinoids. Then from there, you take that cannabinoid hydrocarbon mix and pretty much cook off the excess residual solvents. So where you're left with just a cannabinoid crude content. And crude is more of think of it kind of like a motor oil aspect. Crude oil is like your used motor oil, real darkish, real dark, thick consistency. Still remains a lot of plant fats, lipids, and waxes. And then from there, when you distill it into a distillate, you pretty much are burning off the plant fats, the waxes, and the lipids to where you're left with a nice honey golden cannabinoid content, which is your distillate.
So we've had some tinctures, the oils that taste real crude, like it has a very bitter. I mean, I don't mind it, but it's just a really strong taste. And then we've had some that what we sell now is nano emulsified, and it's like almost got no taste at all.
Yes.
So that's the level of crude. I mean, one's made from crude, and one's from. I'm just asking. I don't know.
Yeah.
But is that one's
So
from crude and one distillate?
yeah. So crude. So is what I'm assuming. So your crude tinctures will have that more of a bitter, earthier taste. And there are some reasonable arguments out there that that's a traditional full plant medicine that your body can benefit from those lipids and plant fats and waxes. Now and typically that tincture is more of like a darker brown or a darker green color. And then you also have tinctures that's made from distillate, which is typically your more golden or clear tincture, which does not have that bitter kind of earthier taste, which allows that tincture to be flavored with certain flavonoids to produce a desired taste. For example, like a chocolate caramel or a cinnamon. Masking that crude taste with flavonoids in a crude tincture can be pretty tough. But one thing I would love to touch on that you mentioned is nano emulsification. And that's something NOAA is full speed ahead in. The nano emulsification is I think is going to be the next big wave of extraction techniques. So nanoemulsification, once you either take the crude or the distillate and you nanoemulsify it, the benefits there, in the nanoemulsification process, your end product becomes 80% more bioavailable in your body. So where you have a standard non-emulsified product, to where by the time it gets through your liver, your digestive system, you've only really picked up roughly 25 to 30% of what was available in that product. The nanoemulsification allows you to pretty much pick up 80% of that content, because ultimately the nanoparticles can bypass your liver and they're absorbed in your mucous membranes. And some nanoemulsification products, you can just a straight topical, it'll absorb straight through your cell walls of your skin. We actually have a small nano emulsification facility in Greenville, North Carolina, to where we're taking distillate and nanoemulsifying it into a water soluble product. So a lot of your big industry players that are looking to formulate drinks, or breweries looking to beer that micro scale beer, can actually use a water soluble product that has been nanoemulsified, that is much more streamlined in their current manufacturing processes through their injector nozzles or through their diaphragms. But ultimately, it's a much more benefit for the end user, because it is, once again, making that 80% bioavailable possible.
I got it. Well, that makes me feel better. We started out selling crude, and we used, I think it's the chlorophyll that gives it that bitter taste. And we just had some customers who couldn't handle the taste, and I think we switched to nano completely, like a year and a half ago. And people like it. It works. It doesn't taste as strong, but so that's the future, is what you're saying.
I strongly believe that the nanoemulsification products is going to be leading the way for, once again, many different aspects. But ultimately, it provides a much more, you can provide a smaller dosage that is much more effective, which I think the industry is going to have to take a little bit to get used to. For example, you're used to seeing, let's say, for example, a gummy that's made out of distillate, let's say 30 milligram gummy. Well, you can get that same effect from a nanoemulsified gummy, let's say that's 10 milligrams. So, and something you may see this as well in your stores, Sam, a consumer that's used to coming in and purchasing a 30 milligram dose, and now you're telling them that a 10 milligram dose is even better. There's going to be a consumer education that really needs to take place for nanoemulsification to really be in that front line, in my opinion.
Yeah, you don't want to tell somebody who's buying something for $100 that they're only absorbing 20% of that.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's a lot of waste. So you're saying it doesn't take as much, because not as much. The body absorbs more bioavailability.
Absolutely.
When you say full spectrum, and if it's coming from a nano emulsified distillate, does that mean other cannabinoids are added back in, or is there anything? I mean, it's different from an isolate, which is just CBD.
Correct.
So can you speak to that?
Yeah. So ultimately, there's a full spectrum and a broad spectrum, and then also, once again, isolated, also known as isolate. So a full spectrum has your host of cannabinoids. So it can have, it'll have your heavy hitters of your CBD, and then also, a true full spectrum will have, maybe small concentrations of CBG, CBC, and also small concentrations of THC, but yet under the legal limit. So I'm a firm believer in full spec, kind of like the entourage effect, that, not just that CBD, but those other minor concentrations of cannabinoids is much more beneficial to our body than just an isolated CBD or a broad spectrum of CBD. And the nanoemulsification is pretty much the same. If you start out with a full spectrum distillate that's nanoemulsified, those minor concentrations of cannabinoids will carry over in that nanoemulsification process, to where if you have a broad spectrum product, you pretty much have just a major concentration of CBD, once again, can still be nano-emulsified, but that pretty much is what you put in is what you get out. So you're still left with a nano-emulsified broad spec. I'm a full believer in full spectrum. We also offer a full spectrum soft gel that's been encapsulated, but there are some, there's some setbacks to that as well. Small concentrations of THC, is in a full spec product, and is, that can possibly pose some issues to a traditional drug test. I haven't seen that a lot, but there have been some cases where a full spec product can produce a positive drug screen for THC. But as long as you understand that may be the case, I firmly believe that a full spec product is much more beneficial for your endocannabinoid system. Our bodies are built up, has a endocannabinoid system that feeds off of these cannabinoids. And in my opinion, the more we can feed it, the better off we're able to maintain that homeostasis. So once again, the full spec with all those, your major concentrations of CBD and then your minor phytocannabinoids along with that dose.
So we'll be right back with more about full spectrum, broad spectrum, and isolate with Kevin Schenkel.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We read one book a month and then we talk about it. Books like Stephen King's The Shining or Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you're on the hunt for book recommendations and enjoy sparkling conversation, come read along with us and then listen in.
So where were we? We were, I've always wondered if we always sell full spectrum in our store unless somebody says I'm drug tested. And we've had people go take drug tests and report back. And sometimes those full spectrum products do show up on those tests. So my thinking is, if I want to use CBD in order to lower my level of anxiety, then do I really want to take a product that could show up on a drug test and I'll lose my job, because that's going to cause higher anxiety. So we sell broad spectrum for people who have that concern. But I'm like you, full spectrum's better. It seems to work better. People report that it works better. So Kevin, what about, and I'm always bad-mouthing isolates. Nothing wrong with them, but I mean, we don't sell them, and I just don't think they're as effective. What do you think? But they're pretty popular, and for some reason it costs less. That's what I don't understand. Why would it cost less to do more processing?
And well, ultimately, I think when all of this shakes out, ultimately taking, once again, from crude to distillate to isolate, now you have a third manufacturing process there. I firmly believe is what we've seen in the extraction facility. A lot of these companies have taken products straight to isolate, and now they're pretty much just setting on this product because all the expected big players to come join this big game has not been allowed to due to some FDA regulated issues. One benefit that I would like to kind of touch on with isolate, so think of CBD isolate, and then if you can isolate each cannabinoid, you can pretty much concoct a cannabinoid cocktail. So if you have an endocannabinoid screen or a cheek swab to identify and kind of what your body is lacking, you can go back to formulate a true cannabinoid cocktail that is perfect for your body to kind of bring back balance to that homeostasis. And so, for example, if our body's lacking some CBC, we're great on CBG, very low on CBD. You can take that combination of isolate from isolated CBD, isolated CBC, and mix them up for a kind of a medicinal component that's strictly formulated for your body. Because in the cannabis industry, it affects everyone different. You could take a 30 milligram gummy, I could take the same 30 milligram gummy, and ultimately they could affect us in two completely different ways. So with being able to isolate every cannabinoid and be able to formulate a personally derived, cocktail, for the lack of better use of words, personally for yourself. That way, you know exactly what your body needs, and you can pretty much formulate that from isolated cannabinoids to create your personal formula that your body affects, or that your body absorbs and needs the most. That is one benefit of isolated cannabinoids. Everybody thinks of isolate as just CBD, but you can isolate CBG, you can isolate CBC, CBN. So ultimately, it's just pretty much breaking down that compound to a singular isolated cannabinoid. So I think in the future, when personalized formulations are kind of brought to light, that's where isolate can add a huge benefit. But until that time gets here, I see it pretty much kind of taking the back burner to your full spectrum product.
Now, I've never heard of that before. Is that something is that your idea, or is that something that's being discussed, like these, personalized cannabinoid cocktails?
Yeah, so we've been working with a group out of Kentucky that it's a doctor that has been working on pretty much, it's a cheek swab that you can have performed, and it basically pretty much gives you a report on your endocannabinoid system. So you know exactly what you have deficiencies and efficiencies in your body. So and the science is very new, and I'm speaking loosely to this, but ultimately you can go in for an endocannabinoid screening and pretty much get a result that tells you exactly what your body is deficient in. So let's say, for example, Sam gets a cheek swab, his tests come back, he's low in CBC, CBG, and CBD. Well, you can take from there, you know exactly what your body's needing. So you can formulate a cannabinoid cocktail that I guess I am terming that myself, personally formulated for your endocannabinoid system.
See, that's incredible. One day we'll be able to, probably not that long from now, we'll be able to pick our algorithms on when we go on social media, and we'll be able to pick our cannabinoids when we use cannabis. Hey,
absolutely.
You know what I want to talk about before we wrap it up is Delta 8 THC. It's fascinating. It's just like it came onto the scene as business was, just to be honest, it was declining, not falling off the cliff, but it was, the CBD business was, for us, was a little bit in decline. Here comes Delta 8 THC, and wow, we're doing okay again. It's kind of like CBD was 2 years ago. How did that happen?
So Delta 8 THC provides a psychoactive effect. And, ultimately, from a gentleman that doesn't like alcohol or 3 glasses of wine that wants to come home and have that relaxation and that little bit of head buzz, Delta 8 provides that. And you hit the nail right on the head. Delta 8 THC has really made a big financial impact on a lot of the CBD retail stores. And not only that, but from a farmer aspect, a farmer now can take their CBD flower and have it infused with Delta 8 THC, and it makes their product much more in a higher demand, which has really helped the hemp space, on the East Coast. And Delta 8 THC is a completely legal substance, under the 2018 Farm Bill. Delta 8 THC is derived from CBD. Delta. I'm sorry.
Can you talk a little bit about how that works? I mean, it's a minor cannabinoid, so there's not a lot of it in there, but it's somehow converted or derived. Can you explain how that?
Yeah, so Delta 8 THC is found in very, very minor concentrations in certain genetics. But ultimately, Delta 8 THC can be converted from CBD. So you have a reaction vessel that's carried under certain temperatures and pressures with the correct catalyst. You can take CBD isolate and convert it to Delta 8 THC, which you see a lot. So that's why a lot of people say, oh, it's synthetic. But ultimately, it's not a synthetic, a true synthetic compound. It is just created from CBD isolate that has been converted. So Delta 8 THC is just one carbon chain different from Delta 9 THC, hence your psychoactive effects and more of a traditional, more of a relief, very similar to traditional marijuana.
So Ace's Hemp extracts, do you also convert?
So Ace's Hemp is currently not converting to Delta 8 THC because once again, Delta 8 THC still is in the gray, and Ace's Hemp is by far one of the most FDA regulated ready facility, and so we don't want any type of possible gray areas to hinder the FDA facility. So Noah Brands does convert CBD into Delta 8. We also infuse flower, and we also manufacture edibles as well with Delta 8. We've seen a major increase in demand from Delta 8 THC, ranging from the infused flower, the infused pre-rolls, taffies, gummies, pretty much anything digestible, which is another, once again, gray area with the FDA. But ultimately, it's kind of been the savior for the hemp industry this past year.
Yeah. What other cannabinoids have you experimented with? What goes well with it? Because that's an isolate, right? So if you want kind of a full spectrum Delta 8 THC, you might combine CBN or CBG or what? Have y'all experimented with that?
Absolutely. So Delta 8 is its end product is a distillate, and there's two different forms of the distillate. One is which is a water clear distillate, and the second being that honey golden distillate. From there, you can take that distillate and blend with, once again, either other isolates or distillates. We have found that CBG works very well with D8. CBG has a large impact on your frontal lobe. So ultimately, it's pretty much a carrier cannabinoid for that Delta 8 THC. And it has been known for some to experience minor anxiety from Delta 8 THC. And then on that note, it's also been shown to absolutely eliminate anxiety. Once again, it's how it affects different bodies in different ways. But we are currently formulating multiple formulations combining other cannabinoids with Delta 8. I feel very strong at like a 10 milligram Delta 8, a 6 milligram CBG, and a 6 milligram CBD is an amazing product.
Wow. Very cool. Listen, I think it's about time for us to wrap up. What else did we not touch on that might be of interest to people listening to this?
Well, I would just like to add that once again, I think the cannabis industry as a whole, whether it be hemp or whatever certain cannabinoid, I think it can have a major impact on the economy. What we're experiencing a tough time with the pandemic in all aspects. We've got some crazy stuff going on in Texas, but ultimately the revenue generated from cannabis can greatly impact the states or the surrounding communities. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of just breeze by when they're thinking about cannabis. But the revenue that it generates is very substantial. For example, Illinois 2 months ago hit their record for monthly sales. And don't quote me on this exactly, but I do believe it was like $62.3 million in 1 month of cannabis revenue. I think that's something every state could benefit from, whether it be taxes, creating jobs. Noah Brands, we created 36 jobs this past year for the outdoor cultivation and harvesting. At the peak of the pandemic, when a lot of people went pretty much jobless, we were able to provide those jobs to kind of offset what they were experiencing, whether it being laid off, the pandemic of pretty much not allowing some industries to work. So ultimately, as far as the revenue side of things, I think cannabis, whether it be hemp, traditional cannabis, CBD, CBG, Delta 8, CBD, CBN, the list goes on. I think it could have a vast impact on the economy.
I got that. I mean, it's not imported. I mean, we talk about, we don't make pillows and Sheets in North Carolina anymore, but that's all local, right? It's all.
Yeah, North Carolina was, in its earlier years was known for the tobacco crop. It made a multitude of tobacco farmers wealthy and to be able to give back to their community and ultimately, put North Carolina on the map as far as a tobacco crop. I don't see there being no difference of just pretty much switching, adding hemp to that cash crop.
Yeah. Wow. That's very exciting and fascinating, Kevin.
I think we're just getting started.
And I walked around in your. I'm calling it a facility. What would you call? Where was I the other day? What was that called?
So you were actually at we've just kind of, internally named it the flower factory, but you were actually at the drying and curing and flower processing facility where we dry and cure and pretty much get bud in a bag ready for wholesale sales.
Yeah, I got it. And it was big. It was bigger than we buy a pound of hemp and think, wow, we've got a whole lot here. But that was y'all had buckets and buckets with 100 pounds each in there.
Yeah, we at one point, right at the end of harvest, I think we were right at about 5,600 pounds in that facility you visited.
Wow.
Of smokable flower.
Well, it was fascinating, and we'll have to do this again because things are changing pretty fast. So, Kevin Schenkel, thank you so much. And before we leave, do you want to let people know how to contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. Noah Brands, its mothership has a website, noahbrands.com. Our farming network is Kazakush Farms, and that's at kazakushfarms.com. We also just released our OXO Wellness, which is oxowellness.com. That's a product line specifically designed and formulated for the wellness industry.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Kevin. We appreciate it.
And thanks for having me. This has been a great experience. I've had a blast.
PhenomWell is produced by Mo Barrow and is part of the Press Play Podcast Network, which empowers hosts to create high-quality podcasts that inspire and entertain. For more information, email content@pressplaypodcasts.com.